Hi, I'm the Doodly Dude, and in this video I will be discussing sigils. What are they, how they work, and how to use them. We will also go over the metaphysical concepts that guide their use, and some practical techniques for the application of these psychic tools. If you're new to such a topic, then this video will be most helpful, and even if you're familiar and already practicing, then chances are this may help you expand upon your understanding and maybe even give you a few new ideas. So sigils, what are they? Well, put simply, they are simple images, drawings or symbols that have been created with specific intention towards creating what could be called a magical effect. This effect could be a small change in some circumstance, or as the catalyst for some grand design conceived of by the practitioner. They come in many different forms and styles, and this is usually determined by the creator and their personal paradigm. How do they work then? And this is a far more interesting question. Sigils work by giving the practitioner a process that allows them to take conscious intention and expand it into what might be termed subconscious will. The conversion or transmission, if you like, of the intent into the greater part of the consciousness, commonly deemed the subconscious, allows the intention to act within the subtler, ever-present parts of the individual reality. Furthermore, as any successful practitioner has discovered, the wider aspect of consciousness is interconnected with the general matrix of reality. Thereby, the sigil, having been created by the practitioner, goes on into the dimension of phenomena and can direct the expression and experience thereafter. To put it more simply, in more common terms, the sigil acts like a message that tells or at least suggests to the experiential cosmos that X should happen. X being whatever the intent or desire or goal that was encoded into the sigil. The precise mechanism of reality that it works on being the fundamental interconnection of all phenomena, which of course includes consciousness. So then we can see that they work by the process of creation and activation. The creation of a sigil as a process allows one to create a simple, distinct glyph or image, which through that process of activation is given meaning, and then through the process of charging is given power. This two-step process will place the intention into the subconscious mind of the practitioner, which is, as we've stated, interconnected with the process of phenomenalization. If you're new to all of this and are thinking, well, how does having something placed into my subconscious make it happen? Which is a fair question that can only really be satisfyingly answered through the direct experience of the process, as the simple truth is that the technique works. That's why it's been taught, that's why it's learnt and practiced for generations now. It's done for practical, tangible results, so the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So then, the basic technique is this. First, write out what it is that you intend to happen in as simple a way as possible, ideally in a direct, positive statement. For example, I will have a cookie. Then, taking that statement, remove the repeated letters, leaving it looking something like this. Now, one takes this set of letters and uses them as the basis for the sigil. This is a creative process, so feel free to do really whatever you want. The end goal is to have them encoded in a simple image or glyph that looks and feels like a magical symbol. For example, if you personally find Nordic runes impactful, then perhaps you could translate the letters into runes, and then arrange those runes within a circle or overlap them, creating a new master rune, or inscribe them on something. Like I said, get creative. The only rule per se is that the sigil itself should not directly indicate the original intent of it, and that once the final sigil has been created, it's better to destroy the working material, or at least separate the final sigil from it. The second step is to charge and activate the sigil. Now this is where the magic happens, so to speak. This aspect of the process will really determine the success of the sigil. Charging a sigil means to channel psychic energy into the sigil. Activation is the completion and release of the sigil such that it may begin to affect the change desired. Psychic energy is a bit of a misunderstood term that could easily be dismissed as pseudoscientific or pertaining to something like qi. What is actually meant is a deliberate type of focus and concentration on the sigil, coupled with a heightened type of emotional state or trance. The most common one that's most commonly accessible to the unskilled practitioner is what is usually called sex magic, though it seldom involves any sex. What is typically done is the use of masturbation to orgasm as the source of energy for the sigil. So in this example, one would then quite simply masturbate to the sigil, likely watching porn or whatever, while maintaining focus upon the sigil, especially at the point of orgasm, where one would visualize the energy of that orgasm going into the sigil. During the charging of the sigil, it's important to note that one shouldn't think or focus on the intent of the sigil necessarily, but rather the sigil itself. The sigil is now the focus, because by the process of its creation, it has been subconsciously linked to that intent. So at the point of orgasm, the sigil is considered charged by that focus and release of energy towards it. The sigil is linked to the intent by its creation, and so the psychic energy carries the intent into the subconsciousness. The activation is done by the completion of this process, which is to simply move on. Forget the sigil. Put it out of your mind as best as you can, releasing it to the intent for which it was created, and consider it done. One may destroy or put away the sigil. If it's in a book, then close it. Whatever the case, you should feel and consider it complete and expect it to work. Now that I've outlined an example of the basic process, let's go into some important principles that govern said process, lest we have another horde of would-be sorcerers beating themselves senseless trying to win the lottery. As I said before, this is an unskilled methodology that becomes quickly obsolete through some basic metaphysical concepts. Firstly, it's important to note one's paradigm, and that belief creates reality, especially when it pertains to magic, which I've outlined in more detail in another video. However, as it pertains to sigils, belief in whether it will work or not, whether you're doing it right, will directly impact the results. So, to put a simple rule upon it, believe in what you're doing. You may be doing it for the first time, so let me now just say this, that it works. That if it doesn't, then you did it wrong. Try again. This is not a matter of faith, it's a mechanism of reality itself. It has been known by many throughout history in various forms, and if you practice it, it will work. And then you will have direct experience in knowing its reality, thereby belief in it will be automatic. Secondly, let's consider psychic energy and its use to charge the sigil. As I said, these are not arbitrary terms thrown around, like so many neo-occult types do, with terms like vibes or energy used willy-nilly, without any depth to their conceptualization. In order to skillfully practice these techniques, one must understand the meaning of such concepts in detail. Psychic energy is just that. In a physical, scientific sense, mental energy. The brain uses physical energy in order to process thoughts, attention, focus, and emotion. So the energy being used is that of focus and concentration, coupled with deliberate trance. The reason it's termed as psychic energy in this context is that it is being used as a concept that establishes a mental image congruent with how it's being applied. Next, we must use this focus in a specific way to charge the sigil. Again, charge is being used in a similar way, herein referring to the real process of imprinting the sigil more firmly within the mind stream of the practitioner. I've already detailed one way, which is through orgasm. However, any heightened emotional or mental state will suffice. Some may use simple emotions such as anger, lust, or even love. There is something that could be said for the emotional simplicity of strong desire itself. However, I would point out that there is a distinct difference between wanting something and willing something. That is really the crux of magical ability. It is the skill to direct one's individual psychic will, the mastery of which will ultimately render the need for sigils obsolete. But I digress. Another way to generate psychic energy is through shock and stress, or through adrenaline. This is much more potent and is the technique preferred by many of the elites, hence the use of sacrifice and so on. Furthermore, one can use drugs and mind-altering substances. Hallucinogenics are a common favorite. However, simple alcohol or marijuana can work. In a broader sense, The use of ritual and ceremony that one may apply are orientated towards the goal of creating what may be called trance. Trance being a state in which the so-called gap between the conscious, subconscious and unconscious minds are bridged. Then, during this state, the greater consciousness is directed through deliberate focus towards the sigil, thereby taking it as directed will. Now, I would like to elaborate on how we can better understand and utilize this process. Firstly, I would say pace yourself. Trying to do multiple sigils a day could see diminishing returns. This is really quite simple. However, as an add-on, I would also suggest not trying to put too many or multiple sigils at all towards the same goal or one intent. You could, however, use multiple, more precise sigils from different angles towards a collective intent. For example, if you desire a promotion, so instead of doing one sigil or multiple sigils geared towards the singular intent of promotion, you could do one sigil which is intended to make the boss like you, then another sigil intended to present opportunities for you to prove your value, and then another sigil allowing the funds to come available for promotion, and so on. Approaching the application of magic like this will yield better results in the long run, which leads me to the next point, and that is money. Money is something every practitioner has sought, especially once they have discovered the applicability of the arts. Well, let me tell you, the people controlling money are fully aware of these sort of techniques, and the money is theirs and a part of their slave system, so don't bother trying to put sigils towards the direct intention of money for money's sake. As I detailed before, you're better off coming up with a real, tangible avenue of success and then using sigils to help steer yourself down that road, removing blockages along the way. Which brings me to the next principle. Make sure there is a realistic avenue for the intention of the sigil to come into being. As I mentioned before, sigils to win the lottery are not a new idea. I'd wish you luck in such an endeavour, but ultimately it will likely prove futile. So instead I'd suggest picking your battles and picking your targets more wisely and realistically. If you're a fat, lonely, jaded, jobless loser, and you think you're going to get a supermodel for a girlfriend through sigils alone, well, I've got some bad news for you. No amount of psychic energy will break reality. You may bend it, you may guide it, but you are still subject to it. Having said that, this is less of principle and more just advice. But as you begin to practice this and integrate it into your life, learn to work with the currents and forces of reality as they flow. As I alluded to before, there is a difference between skilled and unskilled practitioners. That difference manifests through greater success and ease. Furthermore, it's very easy to become an egotistical monster through the realization of such power. However, you will be humbled if that's the case. Learn to work with the general current of fate. The study and use of sigils in isolation will only take you so far. You should also be studying meditation, emptiness, samadhi, synchronicity, art, science, philosophy, and so on. If not, you'll just be developing a more deeply delusional paradigm. Such a state might actually empower the efficacy of your sigils, to be fair, but it will be at your expense. I will now touch on the negative or darker aspects of sigils. Sigils can be used to curse people. After all, the intention is yours to wield as you will. This is probably where you're expecting some dire warning. The Wiccans, for example, have the threefold law, that if you curse someone, it will return to you threefold. But, as I already said, belief creates reality. If you believe that will happen, then you're just asking for it to happen. What I will warn you of, though, is the basic psychic karma, and by karma I mean simple cause and effect. In order to curse someone, a specific intention must be charged and put into action. Well, before any of that energy and intention can reach the target, it will first be with you. Just as the Buddha has said, anger is like holding on to a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. Like I said before, learn to work with the general current of reality. It's easier, more empowering, and positive intentions will just make you feel better overall. Bringing it back to sigils specifically now, I'd like to explain the process of charging and the principles of how to approach it beyond the technique I described. Masturbating an orgasm is functional because it's an easy and natural trance state. Trance referring to the various altered states of consciousness wherein you are not fully conscious and not fully unconscious. Trance is what is actually required to access the wider aspects of consciousness and charge the sigil properly. We often talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and some might even refer to the deeper consciousness or collective consciousness, and so on. The division of such terms are arbitrary. They, as terms, are functional, as points of reference. However, they don't actually represent the reality of consciousness. It would be better to understand consciousness as the waking day-to-day thought stream, and subconsciousness as being the processes and aspects of it that are concurrent but are not within direct awareness. So we say that the sigil must be placed within the subconsciousness and charged with psychic energy. But what is happening in actuality is that you're taking the intention and by charging it, basically giving it a larger mass or imprint in the mind stream, and then upon completion and release, sending it down the mind stream and into the ocean of consciousness through which we are all connected. I will have to detail that interconnection more in another video. So you see, this is why it's important to study various aspects of spirituality, philosophy, and the occult. For it to be skillfully applied, it must be done holistically. I will continue this talk and go into more detail on the use of ritual and integration of various systems to empower these practices in a future video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more. I've been the Doodly Dude.